Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Art of Cybersecurity series. Today, I am really excited because I'm going to be joined by somebody who I consider to be a luminary in the field. And what I mean by that, I mean the art of strategic career growth. And not just in cybersecurity, but just strategic career growth when it comes to technology, risk, audit is definitely an art to it. Now, Caitlin McGaw, who's our speaker today, Caitlin and I believe this is now almost 7 to 8 years back when we must met the first time, Caitlin. And this was in Vegas of all places at a ISACA conference. So it's been a long time since my days in Denver and the States. But it's definitely one of those meetings which leaves a lasting impression on someone. And you left that on me when we met, and your ideas and even the presentation you were doing then on career growth and just thinking about careers differently. That stuck with me through my own career. So it's a conversation I've been looking forward to for a long time. And I can talk a lot about Caitlin and accomplishments. But what I'll do instead is hand it over to Caitlin to introduce herself, and then we'll have Caitlin's entire bio in the video and the comments. So, Caitlin, over to you. Thank you, firstly, so much for coming on and talking to the audience. I think this is a really important topic considering the times we live in and the opportunities that have come up in the last few years in the midst of pandemic. Pandemic has done a lot of bad things, as we know, but it has created opportunities for people which didn't exist prior. So, I mean, there is that silver lining. So, with that, Caitlin, firstly, do you want to introduce yourself and just give a couple of quick thoughts?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Chirag. Well, delighted to be here with you. Yeah, it's been a while since we first met up, and likewise, I'm back at you for making such a positive impression. I think probably some of the things that we'll talk about I'll sort of say, like Chirag, because you sort of embody some of those qualities that I want to talk about that have to do with career success. But just quickly about me. So I've been in consulting for, going on 30 years. I've also been a serial entrepreneur. In consulting, kind of what I've done is for the last over 2 decades has been a recruiter. And during that entire time, it wasn't just put the body in the seat. It was really coach the candidate and really broker that side of the deal almost in a more concerted way than the sort of the client side element. And that's because I was focused the entire time from 1997 onwards on IT audit. And as we kind of grew and the fields around risk and assurance grew, we took on more searches in IT risk and governance and compliance and security. And so, and I was thinking the other day, I placed my first CISO in 1999. Yeah, right.
Wow.
For a major insurance company in Chicago. And I remember to this day, as I was then hiring, his key guy, he was telling me, like, I'm running around with my hair on fire. And that was security in 1999, is these very understaffed shops with people trying to do everything with limited resources. So needless to say, have watched all these fields evolve, and currently have morphed my recruiting into coaching, parlaying all those skills over the last 2 decades. And then on top of that, writing for ISACA, their at ISACA newsletter, as the careers columnist. There are others that participate as well, but I'm sort of on their general roster of people contributing an article every month. And I just really like supporting the IT Audit, IT GRC cybersecurity community in that way, trying to help people build career sustainability. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I've always been IT adjacent. Started out with working at Apple Computer right out of my Berkeley MBA, and sort of moved forward in IT consulting ever since. So it's kind of always been in the Silicon Valley kind of focused area, watching that grow and then watching IT audit grow. So that's kind of me. So let's what have you got for me, Chirag? I'm ready.
Look on just on that, right? Just on that, how progressive, if you think about it, back in 1999 for somebody to go out and hire a CISO, right? I mean, it's pretty. It's interesting how that position has evolved and the importance that position has evolved, and the importance of security has evolved over over the years and decades. And I look back today and I think about, so speaking at a conference recently, and we were talking about the impact of regulations and and over regulations, and it's a good area of discussion. But the one thing which we can't deny, which has happened in the last few years, is the importance of security is well understood, generally speaking. Like, people get it now. You don't have to explain to mature organizations cybersecurity is important. They get it. In fact, now they're engaging with you, and the elevation of the roles has now required security professionals to actually have more skills, in my view, than just being good technical operators. So I think that the interactions have changed, the expectations have changed, the visibility has changed, in my view, all for the better, but if you're equipped with the right tools. And kudos to you, Caitlin, for your work with ISACA and all the articles, the posts, the thought leadership, because it's essentially giving back to the community is how I think about it. It's something which you do on your own time. It's something which you do outside of your typical work hours. And to me, I think that demonstrates a commitment to continuous growth. It's not one and done. So well done, Caitlin. This is a privilege to be talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chirag.
So the first question really, or the first discussion area I want to explore with you, Caitlin, is obviously the decades of work you've done. And I always believe there are patterns. When you see success leave clues, there are patterns to what you can do to replicate that. And in your view, what has set apart the ones you consider as successful or great professionals from the rest? What have they done consistently that has been different than rest of the pack? And I'm keen to get those thoughts, because that's essentially what others can look at and start to incorporate in their own career journeys.
And I was thinking about this, Chirag, and that whole notion of replication. But I'd say the first thing I was thinking about are, what are those traits, and what are the habits, if you will, the mindset, all those things that, and I'm a firm believer that none of that is absolutely inherent, right? That great professionals can continually build, continually improve competencies that are going to help them succeed. So, like, I wrote down 14 things. I'm like, oh my God, well, you have to divide those into buckets. But, like, I think about the trait elements. Emotional intelligence, right, is absolutely critical and becoming more so. I think you had mentioned we're going to touch on communication skills, those soft skills, communication skills, very much so. People who are constantly working on that, finding mentors who model strong communication skill sets, who they can watch and kind of replicate or learn from, I think is a critical piece of the habits or the pattern of people that are successful. People who are confident without attitude, so that they have, you want to be around them because they've got this knowledge and they're constantly adding to it, and they're passionate about what they're doing. Maybe not every day they're passionate when they're fighting fires or doing something that's kind of humdrum, but they're passionate about what they do, but they're not arrogant about it. They're interested in teaching others, sharing with others, problem solving, collaborating with others. So that teamwork element, that they imbue their passion into a team, is something that they do consistently. The ability to say, okay, right now I'm just a staff information security analyst, but how am I adding value? Can I pull back and see myself as part of this bigger whole? And how does my role add value? And when people invest in determining how they add value, that's huge, as opposed to it's just a job. I go and do it. I get, sometimes I'm fed up with it, as opposed to constantly reminding themselves, this is the value that I'm adding. And how can I add more value? What can I think about above and beyond my sort of job responsibilities or what I've just been tasked with? Gosh, there's this woman that I'm still tracking her career to this day, who I placed at Motorola as an IT auditor in their IT audit rotation program. And she'd had a couple of years of public accounting, and so now she's maybe in year 3. And at Motorola, she realizes that because it's a rotation program, they constantly need to recruit. And recruiting for Motorola was not easy. They were traveling the 50%, and they were out 3 to 6 weeks at a time on those engagements. That was pretty tough stuff. So what did Casey do? She put together this awesome recruiting brochure. She built it herself as like a PowerPoint deck that could be sent to candidates. And I got a copy of it from the IT audit manager at Motorola. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just what we need. It's cool, it's sexy, it's from at that time, Gen X viewpoint, but, and it worked. Did anybody ask her to do that? No, but she realized that this was something they could really use. She sold the idea to management. She took charge of it and created it. Yeah. That is the pattern of a go-getter, of somebody who is going to succeed.
How good is that, Caitlin? And there's so many, pearls of wisdom there in what you described. And essentially, it starts with, to your point, adding value is. So what I heard you saying is, when you think strategic career growth, and if you think about how you want to grow, firstly, start where you are and see what else you could add value in. And that aligns nicely with some things which I believe cybersecurity is not just cybersecurity we're talking about. I know we're talking about other disciplines which are complementary as well. But even within cybersecurity, starting with just understanding what is your business, starting with understanding what is your service, why do you exist as an organization, and then working backwards. I think if you have that mindset, it allows you to add value further. So that's awesome. So add value, be somebody who's always aspiring to learn and grow. Focus on communication skills. I don't think anybody can say that they're 100% there. I think it's a journey for all of us. Even if you're doing public speaking for years, it's always something new you can learn, always something where you can get better. And that to me is a key attribute of somebody who when I talk to, and to your point, you've been tracking a career of a person who you think is demonstrating that attribute. The experience I have similar is people who I've seen just kind of get it. Other people, not necessarily who had all the technical skills, but rather who came with the mindset of how can I help, and just had a bigger vision than what their role required them to, as opposed to just coming in and delivering on the 5 things they were expected to. So I think that's a key point. So well said there, Caitlin. The other thing which along these lines, right? So I think we've covered this, but the one area I want to dig deeper is networking. So networking is always promoted in any major career development area as one thing which you should do. But in my experience, and this may be slightly controversial sometimes, is networking by itself won't get you there. Like, it's fine to network, but you need to have a purpose. And a lot of people, and I've heard this from some people, right, who say that, well, I don't like to be around many people. I just like to be left alone and do my own thing, but I still want to be part of a community. So it's a very tricky situation. Is there's some extroverts or people who display the tendency who are just happy to be around people and derive energy from it. From some others, not so much. But how do you see the role of networking? How do you see it applied to people who you perhaps are naturally more introverted, or those who don't necessarily want to be around a lot of people? How do they go about this?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think people do struggle with this. And let's just call a spade a spade. A lot of us are introverts inherently, myself included, and not naturally an extrovert. Not the one who's going to be out there live at the party telling a zillion stories. You kind of train your professional extroversion, if you will, right? And I think a lot of introverted folks in all of our disciplines, cybersecurity, ITGRC, whatever, have learned that if they're going to succeed in the management ranks, they have to learn that professional extroversion. All right, so to networking, that's a wonderful place to sort of practice that. My thought process about networking, a lot of people see it as kind of salesy, and that sales is kind of obnoxious or icky, and that it's sort of ugly because it's self-serving. And I think that's what a lot of people think that networking is, that I'm going to some meet and greet event where I'm supposed to work the room and I'm supposed to hand out my business cards and, with some objective in mind.
Right.
Whereas really organic networking is establishing an actual human connection with people, and genuinely being sort of interested in hearing what they have to say and talking with them. One of the things I've sort of trained people to do is walk up to someone and say, tell me about the cool stuff you're doing. I'd love to hear, and then you can tell them some cool things. So it's a reciprocal sort of interaction but who doesn't like to talk about the cool stuff they're doing?
Yeah.
So I think if one can find venues that you can feel comfortable in, and that's why I think participation in professional organizations is a brilliant way to work your way into networking in a comfortable setting, whether it's ISSA or ISC squared or ISACA, or in the United States we also have InfraGard, where you can liaise with FBI, government security people, together with private business security folks. I mean, there's lots of ways to participate in those organizations where you basically have a safe space.
Yeah.
But I have found that a lot of very successful professionals also find a lot of benefit to networking within community organizations where they volunteer for something that they're really passionate about, and that helps them develop more ease with talking to folks that they don't know. They have a shared interest. But I think it's beyond starting small. It's going in with that mindset that I'm here to just I'm going to present myself in an interesting way and practice that small elevator pitch. Doesn't have to be flashy, but just so you feel comfortable. And then asking people about what they're doing and have them talk. And when you listen, people are thrilled. How often do we really get listened to during the day? And that's a huge part of building a sort of a charismatic leadership presence, is that ability to connect with people and really listen and make them feel like right now you're the only person I'm paying attention to. So I think networking, if we can get off our thought process that it's icky and salesy, and that in fact by giving of ourselves we're paying it forward to others, and that if I make this connection with Jane over here and Amar over here, and I find out that they too should meet up, I can play that role of connecting the dots, and people are really super happy about having those additional connections made for them. So there's just a lot of value to doing it, but I think easing your way into it, if you're not comfortable with it, with the notion that you can do it organically in safe spaces, is a really great way to go.
Wow. All I can say is wow, because it's just so much insight into that, right? And it's and to your point, as opposed to just an objective you want to hit, it's still a purpose. But the purpose here in this case is a learning mindset, is interacting with people. And you were right. I read some books on that. Is even the most introverted folks, a way to get them out of their shell is to ask them about what they do. It's not just talking about random things, is opening them up with just the question, essentially, what is it? Tell me about the cool stuff you're doing. And they may start talking about it, because somewhere we all like to talk. And you just brought up a really good point. We want to be listened to, and people enjoy being listened to. And it's a great way to get started. And safe spaces, like you mentioned, in terms of your industry bodies, in terms of associations, I agree with you completely. And in my own career journey, I mentioned this before, when I moved from the States to Australia, ISACA was that comfortable place for me, because I was a ISACA member in Denver for many years. And then when I moved to Sydney, that was my first place. In fact, today, a lot of friends who I have beyond professional connections are the ones who I met through ISACA, because that was like the only people I knew. As a community I knew. So it's the power of being part of those communities. I don't think networking necessarily implies that you show up in a room of 200 people and then try to make those 5 or 7 sales. I mean, that's, to your point, it's not the best way. It's more about how do you meet, how do you contribute, and then things just happen. And I think sometimes you want to let things unfold the way they do. You can't have it all planned out, is what I have learned. Is sometimes there are some just happy coincidences that come about when you just go in with a mindset of just being there, of just talking to people with no specific goal in mind, being landing a job or whatever. Well, that could be your purpose long term, but you need to start building some bridges. So that's really good, Caitlin. The other area which I think is kind of ties into the whole conversation we are having is soft skills. And now soft skills, the term has been used for a long time, but I just want to take a step back and ask you, what do soft skills mean to you? And why do you think, if you think that, by the way, that the demand for soft skills amongst technology, cyber, IT, GRC professionals is higher than it has ever been?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, and that, you see, you're right. Always get the person to stipulate. What does it mean to you? This is a side note. When I was in recruiting, and I'd get somebody who'd tell me, a hiring manager would tell me, I want a really technical cybersecurity person, and I'd say, okay, so what does technical mean to you? And because each hiring manager had their own definition of what a really technical cybersecurity person was. Soft skills. So when I think of that, I think of first and foremost, emotional intelligence piece of being able to put oneself in the other guy's or gal's shoes and empathically thinking about what's going on for them. And that's so critical when you're dealing with stakeholders and process owners and control owners and folks who are struggling to get stuff fixed.
Yeah.
And you may end up with potential conflicts in terms of, I need you to do this, but they're doing that. And, I need it on this timeline, but you don't have time for downtime in your production schedule and so forth. So, if you can put yourself, if you keep working on developing emotional intelligence, that's a key piece of being able to resolve conflict, which is a huge part of all these roles that we're talking about. Soft skills obviously mean communication so that you can build business case, you can persuade, you can tell sticky stories that people remember. And that's critical for establishing the value that you're adding and creating shared purpose. It also means good writing skills. And I think that's something that everybody can continually work on. And as we escalate in our careers, the level at which we write and the way we write has to adapt to the different writing tasks that we're given. Paramount for anybody looking to build their career are the communication skills and the emotional intelligence. The writing skills, I will say, those who write poorly have a very hard time going up the upper rungs of the management ladder.
Caitlin, you hit on a point which is really close to my heart. Like, I completely understand and completely agree on the emotional intelligence part as well and the communication. But the writing thing, that is just so important. I'm so glad you brought up writing skills in the context of soft skills, because to a lot of people that does not naturally, connect is soft skills and writing. But I was having a conversation as part of this series around what makes good speakers and presenters and engaging interviewees and interviewers. And it, funny enough, came back to writing. Is the art of writing is such an amazing ability. And it's something which you need to grow and you continuously work on, is tailoring messages and articulating them. And it's something that I keep working on in my professional life, is the art of packaging things, right? Because when I'm dealing with, and a lot of my work is essentially dealing with senior stakeholders every day, and those folks are always time poor. And if you're trying to communicate a very complex idea, writing is the way you start about that, packaging things with options, recommendations, short, sharp, and there is other stuff which you can lean on if you need to, if somebody's interested. But that's so hard, and it's actually much harder than people think, is to write succinctly, sharply, to the point. So it's amazing that you brought that up in terms of soft skills, because I do think a lot of people need to make that connection. So that's really good insight there, Caitlin. On that area, right? I mean, we've talked about a few different aspects of career growth and thinking, adding value, communicating, collaborating, growth mindset, emotional intelligence, writing. If you had to package all of these things together, now back in the day, and I still think there's sometimes questions that come up, where do you see yourself 5 years from now, right? I mean, that question has always been an interesting question to me. Is sometimes it depends, right? But it's good to have that horizon. And as I think about my career journey, it's an important question: is what do 5 years look like? Because you may not hit there, but at least it's good to, because that's a strategy, right? At least you have something. You're not just living and thinking month to month, because then that's not really strategic, thinking. So if you had to give somebody, and let's just pick an example, right? So we can make it specific. Let's pick an example of a mid-career professional. So somebody who's not new to the industry, has probably worked, let's pick a number, 7 to 8 years, has reached a mid-managerial level in the organization. And sometimes that's the level which gets the most frustrated at times, right? Because you are in that weird zone where you have some responsibilities, actually a lot of responsibilities, but you're managing both ways, upwards and downwards, right? So it can put you there forever if you're not thinking strategically. For a mid-career professional, what should a 5-year plan look like, combining all the elements we've talked about?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I had this conversation. I was doing a big presentation for ISAC on career planning, and I got in touch with a friend of mine who's a CISO for a major energy company, and I asked him kind of like, how did you plan out your career? Was it just happy accidents? Did you absolutely plan it? And his commentary was, well, let me show you. He said, don't share this with anybody, but let me show you this great form that actually one of my staff people created, and I've just lifted it because it's brilliant. And what it was a graph, right? A two-dimensional graph. And what she had done, and then what he had done subsequently, is plot out years, right, of your career, and the titles that you're aspiring to. I'm imagining an upward slope here, right? The titles that you're aspiring to as you progress. So let's say that as a 7-8 year professional right now, you're a manager, right? As you've said, and you want to make senior manager, or let's say director. Let's say that there's 2 steps in this career, because I'll digress for 1 minute. One of the things I think that people don't give enough heed to is that titles are pretty flexible, and time in grade is still highly valued by organizations. And so the notion like, I want to be a senior manager for 2 years, then I'm going to jump to director. Yeah, maybe, but it really depends on who your target company is, and or companies, and what their ideal profile in terms of experience for that individual might look like. So what was on this grid was, what certifications do I need to advance? What additional skills do I need to add to advance? So is that, are there more technical skills that I need to add right now? My company's going to the cloud, and geez, I better get an AWS certification ASAP, right? But more importantly, what kind of leadership experience do I need to acquire? Is it managing staff? Is it managing large projects? Combination of both. Is it professional presence? Is it better communication? So the person it's dependent on the person taking an inventory of and doing a gap analysis. Where are they now? What do they need to have to ascend up the ranks? And that might depend on input from one's existing managers, if one can get that feedback, right? What do I need? What do I need to do to move up the chain one more step? And then projecting out, what do I need to do to get 2 steps above where I am now? The same CISO that I was talking to told me, like, I realized that I needed to learn about budgeting. It was like, who's going to entrust me with a several $1 million information security budget if I don't have any budgeting experience, or I don't have any skills in that area? And he went to a junior college and took, a management budgeting class, and then started, taking on elements of additional work that would allow him to scope out budgets for projects and other areas that would start to build that management skill set around running the budget for a department. So, I think there are many pieces to it in terms of sort of the path one charts, and the elements, the guardrails, right? The fundamental guardrails, which are certifications, technical skills, leadership, and communication, soft skills that one has to build. Those are the guardrails that form the foundation. But then there's another level of detail that I will insert into this. I know I talk a lot, so stop me if you want to interject.
No, Caitlin. Look, this is the point, right? Is essentially getting beyond just high level generic stuff and actually talking about the real things. So by all means, take as much time as you need.
Okay, so the next level of detail beyond the I want to be a director is like, geographically, where am I going to do that?
Right.
This is a huge piece, because what does that determine? It determines, what does the local market look like?
Yeah.
I.e., what companies are in the market that I'm targeting that might hire somebody like me? And then the research around what, like now we have LinkedIn, which is brilliant, and other areas for, social engineering. I always think of the DEF CON, capture the flag contest, where you have to eke out as much information as possible. That's why I love LinkedIn. You can go out to LinkedIn and just like sponge up all this information about departments and people and how they progressed and like how long have they been in that role and what certifications do they have. But you go and look and you start to build your like war room strategy map of your target companies, and you start to determine for yourself, oh, they like this kind of profile. They like this kind of experience. I can see looking at their IT postings, oh, their input, they've got a big cloud initiative, or they're doing something with containerization or virtualization or something else. And you're like, okay, maybe that's something I need to gain more skills around. But you start to build a very detailed, strategic map that will help you support this, rough framework that we've created of, title, where am I going in 2, 3, 5 years? You've got to support it with this other kind of strategy if you're going to accomplish what you want to accomplish with your career. A lot of people say, oh, I'll just work. I can go anywhere. And you're like, really? You would move to Alaska? And they're like, okay, maybe not Alaska. And you say, like, how about Los Angeles? Oh, heck no, it's too expensive. No, I'm not going to Los Angeles. Okay, so now we feel it's not Alaska, it's not Los Angeles. So where are you going? So I think people actually need to really be specific with themselves. This is how you do this pragmatically.
Yeah. Wow. No, that is really good. And it's really good, that level of detail. And it's so many things that I'm kind of picking up on, which are really important there, Caitlin, is the first thing is nobody else is going to do it for you. So you are responsible for your own strategic journey and the map. But that point you brought up, and which is a really important point, is it's hard when it's just everything, right? Like breaking it down into some form of specificity gives you a target to shoot for. And to your point, it doesn't have to be a job title. Like job titles are flexible depending on which industry you are. In fact, I've seen some industries where job titles are very rigid. And in some industries where, even if the remuneration does not increase dramatically, your job title can increase pretty flexibly. So like, I think what matters to you in that context is important. But at any level, what I heard you saying is get closer and closer to what your target state is. And I also think, if I may add on, in my view, another thing which helps is at some point, especially at a mid-career level, you should have it figured out what you're good at and what you enjoy.
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's just and put your ego aside for a second, right? And just put your ego aside and don't think like I need to be good at everything, because honestly, nobody's good at everything. So it's like, what are the things you're good at and you enjoy? I think that's the happy point to me. And that has in my own experience helped me, where I've kind of figured out what I'm good at. Doesn't mean I won't work on things where I feel like it's an area of weakness, but I want to hone my strengths more necessarily than opposed to trying to branch myself out so thin that I lose my strategic advantage. So I think combining that and what you laid out as a roadmap, I think is really well said. So I really appreciate that, Caitlin. I think those are important insights, and I think the audience will greatly benefit from the whole thing, but especially that part of how you plan your 5-year career roadmap.
Yeah, let me add one.
Yeah, sure.
Let me jump in and add one more thing. And you brought up that good point about titles. And I often hear from people that they really, I'm edging up on that 5-year mark, and I look at my friends in public accounting and they're managers, and I'm not a manager yet, and I should be a manager. And, really, to your point, Chirag, about what are you good at? Not everybody's good at being a manager. Not everybody should be a manager. Not everybody wants to be a manager. There's nothing that says that to move up, you have to be a manager. I know lots and lots and lots of people who are extremely well compensated individual contributors who pull together big projects and coordinate big bunches of people cross-functionally. But do they manage any of them as direct reports? No, not really. And they're super happy in those roles because they realized what they're good at and what they love doing. I know other people who are really technical gurus in specific technical niches, and they love doing that. And they're very well compensated for doing that. So I think getting over this idea that the only way to validate one's career worth is through that ascension of title is a really important thing to get one's head around.
Okay, Lynn, I think we've touched upon, and we could probably do a full conversation on just this area, but I'll just give you just my thoughts, and because it's something I brought up at one of the recent panels that I was on, and it's the idea of CISO and the cybersecurity professional journey. Now, in my view, and again, this is my opinion, a CISO is technologist perhaps last and needs to be a business person first in their thinking. They need to be a translator, needs to be an advisor, and be willing to let go of technical details. I think that to me is the evolution of a CISO. If you have that seat at the table, you need to be able to think that way. Now, a lot of people who came in the industry, in the security industry, and have moved up the chain and at mid-level, came in many cases from a technical background. So they came from technology, which they liked, they loved, and that kind of helped them grow. And in my view, if they're not willing to let go of that, it can create problems. So, but if we frame the conversation always as CISO is the be-all and end-all of cybersecurity professionals' journey, that's a problem, because there are some people who are really good, to your point, individual contributors, love what they do, and can carve out a very successful career path being a world-class technologist. So I think it's really important on how we frame these conversations to ourselves and not let titles determine our own career progression. So it's fascinating conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now look, Caitlin, I think we're coming close to the end.
Gosh.
But
I just my clock. Yeah, wow.
Our time has flown, and actually, which is why I wanted to, and I'm so grateful that you came on the series, because somebody like you who's seen so many journeys and has so much insight. I think it's what I know I learned from through this conversation, and I'm sure people will learn from. In the end, Caitlin, just closing out, one last question, and then we'll end this. And this question is tough to put as a last question because it could require a whole long conversation, but we'll try to keep it short.
I'm excited.
Skills shortage. That's a very common term now being used around in cybersecurity circles and other circles, but especially cybersecurity circles. Now, I have to ask for you, what does that mean, and how do you go about bridging that? But to me, is it a skills shortage, or is it a shortage of imagination on how we can go about addressing cybersecurity needs in a different way than what you've traditionally done, is just replace a bunch of requirements for a new person? What are your thoughts on this topic before we close out?
Okay, gosh, Chirag, you're just opening Pandora's box here.
That's what we like to do here.
we could talk for hours on this subject, but trying to sum it up kind of quickly, I and this is my opinion, but I'm going to lay a lot of the problem at the feet of hiring managers who write really, really lousy job descriptions. And what that does is oftentimes they put everything in the kitchen sink into the job description, and it actually discourages, and I will say in the US, it discourages women, it discourages minorities. Here we have, huge diversity and inclusion initiatives, and yet we write job descriptions that cause people not even to apply because they feel like quickly they're an imposter. They don't have this entire skill set to bring to the table, and they're not even it's not worth their time to apply because they're just going to get tossed out or never called resume into the black hole. I think if we could get past these kitchen sink job descriptions and really have hiring leaders and teams think about, what do I really need? Like, what is the minimum absolute skill set that I cannot train for, right? That they have to come in the door with. But what it can I actually physically train for?
Yeah.
And what traits am I really seeking? You know, like you see it time and time again. All you need to do is look at the Duckworth book, Grit, and you see that it's this ability to be resilient and to persevere, and in the face of difficult problems, keep going at it with a positive, optimistic mindset. Right? Wouldn't you really rather have that person who doesn't have every skill set you need on the job description than the person who cannot bring that to the table? So I think there's this big issue of rethinking how we hire and what we interview for. Somebody told me, I was listening to a really cool podcast on cybersecurity hiring and the talent shortage, and the guy was, I think, the former talent acquisition head at Cyber Threat. But in any case, don't quote me on that because I'm probably misremembering. But he was like, you know, oh gosh, it was a great little thing about you hire for basically the traits and the character. You look for skill, but you really hire for character, because he said when the going gets tough, that's when sort of skills lose out to the fundamentals of good character, right? Which he was describing as some of these soft skills like persistence, integrity, teamwork. And I think he had a whole suite of 9 of them, that if hiring leaders would focus on hiring for those character traits, they'd get a lot more bang for their buck, and they'd start to see opportunity, to your point about creativity. They'd see opportunities to hire talent that they might have overlooked if they were only looking for skill.
Well said. Well said. It is that idea of, job descriptions, just thinking about. But you're right. You brought up it's practical. What you just said is really practical, because I've heard people saying, "Oh well, but I need something to be done now." And you brought that up. It's like, well, fair enough. Dictate what are the absolute essentials, but then what are you going to invest in? What you're going to let people learn and grow? Because if you're trying to solve a problem, you can't be doing things which you've always done, which created the problem in the first place. So I so agree there, Ketan. So and maybe we should have another follow-up conversation at some point and talk about this, because I know this could be a full hour, and there's so many facets to this in terms of sourcing strategies, in terms of diversity of thought as well, in terms of what are the complementary areas where people can make transitions into cybersecurity. Is such a fascinating and such an important topic. So something maybe we pick up as a separate one. But Caitlin, I want to thank you so much I really, really mean it. Having you come on, share your thoughts, somebody of your experience, caliber, and reputation, is just really, really grateful for that.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I mean, as always, Chirag, it's just a delight to, put our heads together and have a fabulous conversation. So thanks for the opportunity to just sit and chat with you. It's
Absolutely.
very cool.
It's completely my pleasure. Thank you, Caitlin, and a thank you to our viewers. We'll be back with our another show and another edition. Thank you.